What's up, Chads? Welcome back to the channel. So last night I was able to catch the State of the Union, and man, my initial impression on this, and I could be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but Biden comes right out, and I have to give it to him, he performed well last night, but he comes right out and he's like, Putin bad, Russia bad, we're doing so many things. And that's essentially the message there, was like, we're crushing their economy, we're doing this, we're doing that. We sent $1 billion of aid to Ukraine. And you're like, you guys normally spend trillions. You're sending a billion, like 1 billion? Like, what are you doing, man? Like, and so it seems to me, like with the sanctions and all this stuff that he spoke about, that it's a joke, that it's really theater. But what I wonder is how he's trying to crush this Russian economy and you know, paint Putin as the bad guy. This is what really, really lights a switch for me. When you have an enemy and you paint him as the bad guy, he immediately went in there and went, we as Americans need to unite and come together as Americans, folks. And it's like, no, like that's not what's going to happen at all. But what they're trying to do is shift the conversation to Russia, man, bad. We need to do something about it. And I don't think that they're going to do anything about it. And this is, I mean, they haven't sent any troops. They haven't sent any planes. They haven't done a no-fly zone over Ukraine. They haven't done anything. If they didn't want Ukraine to be invaded, they would just say, Ukraine's a no-fly zone. We're going to guard it with, you know, F-22 Raptors and drones. And if Russia goes in there, we're going to pop them. And that's what it is. Now, obviously, that would escalate the tensions, but Russia also might go, how many jets do we really want to lose? And that, you know, would be a counterbalance and, you know, push peace talks forward. Now, I have to say, from just cruising around the internet, what Russia is asking of Ukraine is exactly what we asked and got signed from Cuba. So they're not asking for anything crazy, but when we do it, it's policy. When they do it, it is national terrorism. And it's like, really? You're calling an entire nation a nation of terrorists? Which is just interesting, because then he goes on later in the speech to talk about ghost guns and how you can just buy ghost guns and assemble them, and he wants more regulation on that. You guys know one of my specs is large capacity magazines, only because they say they don't want you to have them and they have no serial numbers. So it's like, oh, well, in the Clinton years, they went to $100 for a 30-round mag. I can get them for $7 to $10 right now. I'm gonna buy them. It's possible 10x. And I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying, like, here's how, like, just crazy. And obviously we have an amendment too, which means the rights to bear arms, not hold, not own, to bear arms shall not be infringed. That means if you tax it or require any sort of regulation on it, technically it's unconstitutional, but I see that there needs to be some balance, so I'm not arguing for that. But I am saying, like, it's technically unconstitutional. We just don't have the huevos to enforce it. But what I got out of that was, this guy immediately went in and said, and we should not be selling guns to anyone on the terrorist list. And I was like, whoa, he's actually saying the quiet part out loud now. And there is a list of people that is rumored to be held of, like, you know, higher risk people, but they're not official convicted terrorists. They're just like on a bad boy list. And he's essentially saying and trying to change the language, and you need to watch for how they're doing this. If you want to see how far this has gone, watch some movies from the mid-90s. Watch Forrest Gump. Watch American Pie. Watch the language in those movies. You'll notice that they're relatively innocent to today's standards, but the language has very, very much changed in only a small period of time. But he's starting to carve the language to something that when American Pie was filmed, the year afterwards, we had terrorism. George Bush got to go through metal detectors, put your hands up, show the freedom pose. You have to give up your freedoms. You know, and what happened to Building 7? Don't ask questions, son. Okay, so what essentially happened there was we lost our rights and freedoms, and we had this new word, the T word. I probably shouldn't say it too much often. So we had this T word, and now we're starting to change the language where we are anointing individuals with the T word. Oh, well, these truckers in Canada, T word. Russians, T word. Americans that think that the election was stolen and that Biden didn't get more votes than any election in history. Anyone who thinks that that's like not actually what happened, T word. Oh, by the way, anyone that's on the T word list, I don't want them to be able to buy or own firearms. Like, you can see how they're slowly corralling the cattle to get into their new world order. Build back better, build back better, build back better. There's a freaking book I am reading right now by Klaus Schwab. When I get to where I'm going, I'm gonna do some work with the grinder, and I'm listening to the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I'll tell you straight up, the World Economic Forum is enemy number one. Like, it is enemy number one. This book is written in 2000, or published in 2017. It talks about everything that's going on right now, and you could make a stretch that our little health crisis isn't by mistake. But nonetheless, I don't want to get this thing banned. I like to be able to communicate with you guys. The wrap up of my thoughts there with Biden, he had a common enemy. He immediately goes for the unification of America. He essentially is doing nothing about the Ukrainian situation, nothing. It's all theater, it's all theatrics. I think that they're gonna milk this crisis as long as they can. I noticed from the very beginning of the speech when he walked in, he's shaking hands, everyone's back slapping and doing that thing, and I'm like, oh, the science has really changed. Like, the science has changed quite a bit since the trucker protests. But obviously now there's a new crisis. It's like trucker protests, shutting down bank accounts. Trudeau's at a low point in his career. He's literally a tyrant, and then all of a sudden he's able to come out and go, well, with the rise of Putin and Russia and the invasion of Ukraine, we need to stop these authoritarians and tyrants. And it's like, Trudeau, you were locking people's bank accounts and trampling them with horses only 4 days before this, my man. Back in Canada, like, not too long ago, they would put you at the other end of a rope for what you did, man. But now you've got a common enemy, and you're sending 464, this is Trudeau, 464 troops to the Eastern Front to guard their NATO allies. Like, 464 dudes? Like, unless these guys are like Navy SEALs, what are they gonna do? Like, it's just theatrics. It's like, oh, the headline, Canada sends troops. No, you didn't. You sent like a couple school buses of homies. Like, what are they doing? They getting like German beers and sitting back and like enjoying like a good lager? Like, what's going down? Like, you're not sending them to Ukraine. You're not doing anything. And so I just bring this up because I think it's all theatrics. As you guys know, I think Russian oil, and these companies have nothing to do with this chaos. You know, these guys are, I mean, they're banning the Russian soccer team from competing in the World Cup. These athletes have nothing to do with this. It's like, it's as much as what Biden does and the stupid things he does, I have no control over it. But it would be like penalizing me as an American because my president is an absolute freaking moron. Like, you don't have to be pro-Putin, but you can't penalize the Russian people or their companies or their banks. And that's exactly what we're doing. So as you guys know, I'm buying as much of this stuff as I can because I'm bullish on it long term. Also, reading the Fourth or listening to the Fourth Industrial Revolution on Audible, the capital of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and I'm skeptical that they'll be able to pull it off. It seems like a very big coordination attempt, and I don't think governments have the competency to do it, but the capital is stated as being in Moscow. I'm going long Moscow, man. I'm not betting against these guys. So, just kind of my thoughts on that was the science had changed, common enemy, Putin bad, forget all about the trucker protest convoy, now we have Putin bad, unite against these T words, and then, moved on to some BS about like taxing the rich and all the typical crap that's in there, and ghost guns and T word, and there was a very end of it, and I don't have my notes with me right now, but nonetheless, those were my thoughts on it. I just think at this point, it's theatrics. I do question if they're going to continue to up the antes and find ourselves in a global war that we can't get out of. And that is something that I don't think is in anyone's interest. And I don't think the people, the plebs, I don't think the plebs want that to happen. But the political elite, I mean, look, the whole reason Trump got impeached in the first place, like the first time, like I forget how many times he was up for impeachment, because like I just can't follow it all. but it was like over some Hunter Biden Ukrainian money laundering scheme. And when you really look into it, that's like, Ukraine is like a playground of money laundering, and like it's number 3 in like in like pornography production. Like it's no capital of peace. And all Putin is saying essentially is like, I want them to teach Russian, I want them to teach their heritage, I don't want them to tear down the statue of the great Alexander, and I want to have a buffer zone. I want a demilitarized zone so NATO can't just launder money. Also, I don't want the 7 or 9 or 10 bioweapons labs in Ukraine, so I took those out. I don't blame the guy. Like, he doesn't want bioweapons labs next to his country. That's a reasonable request. It's the exact same thing we asked of Cuba. And when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, nobody did crap. Everyone was like, oh, well, whatever. And that was America beating up on Cuba, and we didn't win that. The Bay of Pigs, we didn't win that. So just, you know, a little history there. Because we could have taken Cuba over and made them a state or a territory like Puerto Rico. But instead, we just let them do their thing in exchange for our agreement, which is like, we don't want you to be heavily armed and militarized up to an extent off the coast of 90 miles off the coast of Key West. Like, that's just what we wanted. It's the exact same thing that Putin's asking for, but he's being made out to be the bad guy, and this will not end well if we don't speak up against it and be like, no. Like, remember how like the unexperimental were the bad people? If you didn't want to take experimental drugs and give them to your children, you were the bad people. This is a pandemic of bad people. Well, now the science has changed, and we have a new common enemy, and don't allow them to do this bullshit. Do not allow them to change the narrative on you. And do not allow your idiot friends and family, and I mean, I've had to cut a lot of people out. I mean, I really have. But I've had people that were in my life 10 years ago that are actually moving like 1,000 miles to be next to me. So I'm seeing people shift around in my own life, and I'm excited about that. But you've got to circle up, you got to circle the wagons with people who really do think like you. Yeah, I think it's important to test your assumptions and hear people, other sides of the argument. In the crypto space, for me, that's the Bitcoin maximalist. I really want to understand how this works, because I see public currencies and the US elites banning Russian Bitcoin as like, okay, so Monero is the real Bitcoin, right? And they're like, no, it's only Bitcoin. I'm like, so maybe we can patch this and like, you know, change the code a little bit and like add more privacy. And so I'm trying to understand the theology on how we win, because I want the separation of state and money. We have the same thing, but as you guys know, I sell silver and gold, and I'm super bullish on that. I'm bullish on sound money is really what I'm about. But I'm trying to understand someone else's opinion, although we do have common ground. So I think it's important to do that, but I really do think cutting people out of your life that are just like idiots. I mean, if they're driving around in the car by themselves wearing a mask, it's time to get them out of your life. Like, those people are gone, and they're super susceptible to like, we're gonna go start a big war with Russia. Like, no, that's not a good idea. We're gonna have energy prices rising through the roof because of our actions. I mean, it's the US and NATO's actions that have caused this to occur. And it's awful for people involved. But this is what governments do. This is why I don't believe in having large, massive governments. Anyway, guys, please share this to somebody who may need to see this. If you got social media, maybe consider putting a link of one of my favorite videos up there and sharing it. That is huge. If you do that, please comment below so I can thank you personally for helping do that. The channel in the last few days has really seen an uptick in trend, and I just have to thank you guys for doing that, because when you like these videos and you comment below on these videos, it really does make a difference in the algorithm, and I sincerely appreciate it. So until next video, thank you for the likes, the comments, the shares, and I will see you down in the comments. Peace.